Streets to homes is a more meaty question, and I think that it needs to be understood that while unquestionably a program like that, there's going to be some situations where people get housed and feel that they've come out on top, and that does happen. Fundamentally, I think the Streets to Homes program is dishonest and is providing a cover for precisely an agenda of pushing out the homeless and of seeking to conceal the homeless. Because I think the starting point of the thing is that what they're trying to do is, as everyone knows, there is a very large problem of destitution centred in the central part of the city. They want to get rid of it, at least they want to hide it. They want to push it away, and if they can't push it away, ensure that people are just not out there and not visible. So what they've done is establish this Streets to Homes that is supposedly housing people. And it's an alternative to the shelters, which tend to congregate people. The shelters are being massively, there's a massive deterioration in what's going on inside the shelters. There's not enough spaces. As always, the bureaucrats within the municipal system will tell you that, oh, there were 100 beds available last night, there was no problem. They simply do these checks where they check at a time of day when when they're going to get the results they want. But any housing advocate will tell you, and I mean the most liberal, respectable people will tell you that they phone around and there's simply no spaces available. There is nowhere for people to go. The places are hellholes, they're overcrowded, and only extreme cold will drive people in there. People are dispersed. But then they're coming up as well, they're refining it incredibly. And this is why I think, frankly, Miller is proceeding with this agenda of redevelopment with a level of skill and finesse that would have made Lastman blush. Because you've got them refining it very, very skillfully. So that, for example, agencies that provide services to the homeless are not getting funding to do the basic things like sleeping bags and coffee and the things that people need when they're on the streets. That's discouraged. And as I heard one cop say, don't feed the animals and they won't show up. Was the sort of, was the approach. So they've come up with this notion that they're housing people. There's a place you really should go and see, right next to, I forget the exact address, but it's right next door to, within two doors of 249 Sherburn. It's a Toronto housing place, and as you may well know, if they can't move anyone into a place 3 times in a row, it becomes fair game for Streets to Homes. They can, under the rules, they can move somebody in. So there is this rooming house type facility that there's no front door, there's no working front door, and you walk in and people have just been dumped in there without any care, without any supervision. People who have multiple problems in their lives, addiction problems, have been on the streets for long periods of time, need a level of support and assistance if they're going to establish a household, and have just been dumped in there. The conditions in there make Seton House look like a humane facility. And yet those people are theoretically housed under the Streets to Homes program. And if they should go out in the middle of the night, as one man in similar situation just did, and freeze to death in a stairwell, the response will be, he was housed, I couldn't help it that he was a drunk, that was his problem. So I think in a very, very fundamental sense, Streets to Homes is dumping people, not giving them supports, often driving them out to the fringes of the city in a situation where they have no level of support, where they can't do anything, go anywhere. I mean, just a disaster for people. And there's a whole population of people who are like returning exiles sneaking back in, who have just lost the homes that they were provided under Streets to Homes are coming back. So I think it can't be judged in terms of success or failure. I think it's basically deceitful from start to finish. I sort of do think that linking questions of failing to provide housing to military expenditure is actually probably a very good thing. It's true that it's true that City Hall and Queen's Park are not sending people to Afghanistan. I acknowledge that. But in terms of the resources of the country and where they're being allocated and how they're being allocated, I think, first of all, it's factually a very important consideration. But I also think there's a great deal of reluctance and hostility in the general population to what's being done and how Canada is being transformed. Its role is being transformed into a much more overt, overt military aggressor. I mean, just last night I was at some event where I happened to go to the washroom, and there in the men's washroom they have this Canadian Armed Forces recruiting thing and advertisement, and it says "Fight with the Canadian Armed Forces." I thought that's sort of interesting. I mean, I know people get guns and shoot people in the military. It sort of goes with the territory, as it were. But for them to be actually using that word in that way, a few years ago they would have been using, they would have got around it with a bit of a euphemism about peacekeeping, and there would have been lots of pictures of little children sitting on people's laps with maybe guns behind them or something. But like that, so challenging the militarization and what's happening in Afghanistan and what's being done to Afghanistan, and saying that those resources are actually needed to provide for the basic needs of people, I think can strike a chord. I think it needs to be put forward clearly, and I think that you have to explain things to people. But I do think it's probably an important consideration. So that campaign, I think, has real possibilities, and I do think it's not that it's just a certain crowd who's against the war. I think there's a wide feeling that it's wrong, and I think this sort of like concretizes the sense of waste, and we can build opposition around it. So I think, generally speaking, those are I've covered the points that I want to make. And in terms of any sort of like final wrap up, I just say to people that, again, that I think that the fight that's being taken up in public housing is of very big significance in terms of defending a very, very important post-war gain, one of the many things that are on the chopping block. But a victory, the kind of victory that we're trying to work towards, if it could be achieved, would not just be confined to the issue of defending public housing. I think a model of a community resisting and winning is quite a precious thing at this time. And so, I hope people will watch what we're doing. I hope people will give support, and I hope that we can have another forum in a period of time where we can talk much more concretely about the gains that have been made and where the movement of tenants in Toronto community housing is going. And I hope we can at some point celebrate initially the defeat of the plans to pull down Lawrence Heights and build more damn condominiums.